everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Frame. I'm Eric.
And I'm Riley.
And this is a podcast where we talk about movies. Riley, what movie are we talking about this week?
We are talking about probably one of my favorite horror films ever, to be honest, and that's Black Christmas. But not any Black Christmas, because it has now had three films. We're talking about the original 1974 flick, which is a Canadian movie, so I am extra proud to be talking about it on this here first video podcast on Beyond the Frame. So I'm looking forward to what we have to say about it today, Eric.
It was impressive. You say this is like one of your most favorite horror movies. Like I can understand why. I'm not a huge horror person, but I just thought that it was really well executed, especially considering the budget that it had. Like it was like $600,000 budget, and it made like 4.3 million or something like that.
That's pretty good. Yeah. To be honest, I'm surprised it was a $600,000 budget. I was guessing you were going to say something much lower.
Yeah, it punches like way above its weight though. Like I definitely think that they utilize like a lot of I don't know what you would maybe you would consider them like horror tropes now, but for the time that it came out, because I didn't realize this, but this came out before Halloween, like John Carpenter's Halloween, the first one.
To be honest, like we can talk about the history of slashers a little bit, but like this movie kind of was one of the forefathers of it. It was a founding father of the genre. Like before Black Christmas, which, as you said, came before Halloween, which is known as the slasher movie. It's
one of the most iconic.
Yeah, it is the Michael Jordan of the slasher league. But when you look at the history of slasher films, before Black Christmas, you have how do you pronounce it? Giallo, I think is how you pronounce it.
Giallo films?
Yeah, the Italian subgenre that was going on in the 60s, 70s. So that was kind of inching towards what we now understand to be slasher. And then before that, you have Psycho. I think there was another movie called Peeping Tom. But this was one of the first ones, and it really, well, maybe not totally in the slasher genre. I think you could argue that it kind of plays a little bit in the murder mystery psychological
more true
thriller
crime,
realm
almost. But
it's there, and to be honest, it's an important feature of cinematic history and the horror genre as a whole.
I feel like it seems to me that critics really came around to Black Christmas. Like it wasn't really well received when it first came out, but some of the later reviews, like New York Times did a review on it in 2018, and it was very favorable. More so than I read some reviews of I think it came out in 1974. So the year it came out, and people did not like it. People thought it was and maybe that's a reaction to like something new, like maybe they just thought that it was maybe they thought that it was too violent, or it was like too there's too many it was about like playing off of like real things that happened, because it's based off of the murderer in this is like based off of a couple of real life murders that happened, right? Kind of in the same way that Texas Chainsaw is like based on a true story, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that came
some
after?
Family in Texas. No, well, I don't know which came first, but both came out in 1974. I just don't know which one.
Oh, they both did. Okay.
And like rightly, all my comments with Black Christmas kind of being one of the founding fathers, Texas Chainsaw also is in that. It holds a place there too. They are the Mount Rushmore films.
They're in the pantheon of like great horror.
And to be honest, like Texas Chainsaw is definitely more of a true slasher than Black Christmas is. But yeah, 1974 was popping off as a year for horror cinema.
It's surprising. Very groundbreaking, this movie. I think you see a lot of horror staples like POV shots being used in this. And I don't know, I haven't seen Texas Chainsaw, but does it have like similar sort of like iconic horror tropes that you can see developing, or is it kind of like that?
Texas Chainsaw, in terms of like slasher tropes, it more openly embraces the fact that a slasher really is about the killer. The plot is really just the vehicle to getting to the violence. And I think Texas Chainsaw embodies that more. But in terms of some of the more cheesy aspects of the genre, like the POV shots that we see in Black Christmas or that you see in the Halloween movies, it doesn't have anything like that. And if you have the opportunity to see the original Texas Chainsaw, it's actually pretty interesting cinematography style. It's almost shot like a documentary. Like there'll be weird shots, like imagine like the Paranormal Activity movies where there's a camera put up in the corner of a room. You'll see weird shots like that, and it actually makes it it gives it like a grungy, grimy, dirty, cheap film appeal to it that actually it suits the film quite well.
That's interesting, because I do feel like Black Christmas also has like a gritty realism to it.
Yes.
So that's an interesting parallel. I guess before we get too into it, though, we should just talk about the basic plot of Black Christmas, and it's actually very simple. And it almost like when I read the plot synopsis, I was like, oh, this is just going to be like absolute cheese. Like it's not going to take itself very seriously. Yeah. But it does. The plot is very character driven, very emotional. It plays off of a lot of, just like this core, like character, like drama essentially that's like playing out. And to start it all off, like right from the beginning, we see the killer's perspective. We see, and I won't say the killer's name because like, we'd have to talk about spoilers, but I was like so blown away that we go from the title screen right into the killer watching this sorority house and these girls who are partying. And so that's kind of the kickoff. And it really is all about the characters. It's not really about the killer from there on out.
No, and to be honest, like you talked about it already here. The plot it can be summarized in one sentence. A killer comes and visits a sorority house, and one by one, the people in the sorority house are getting killed off. That is the story. It doesn't get much deeper on a superficial level. But what I love about this story, and for anyone listening right now, be prepared. It's going to get into spoiler territory. But the story is very interesting because there's really two main threads that are driving it, and they connect in such unique and interesting ways. So the first thread is really you have this main character, Jess, and she's having a relationship issue with her partner, and things happen during the course of the movie. Revelations come to light, and how she's dealing with that relationship problem. And then the other side of it is there was recently a 13-year-old girl, 13 or 15, a younger woman,
young.
And she was found murdered in a park. And also at the same time, one of the sorority sisters in this sorority house goes missing, and the friend group is concerned, and now they're looking for their friend. And as these two little threads start unraveling a little bit, you see how the whole movie comes connected in this very beautiful, twisting way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's cool because it goes from being like a there's a killer in the house sort of vibe to like a police procedural. They're like the cops are very much involved in this story, and they go about trying to solve this case, and you see it like there was a point at which and we basically have gone through the main plot. It's about these characters dealing with some of their own drama in their own lives, and it's set against this police mystery, essentially.
Beautiful way of explaining it.
Yeah, it is actually a really elegant plot, which I think a lot of horror movies, the plots get very unwieldy. And that is like one of the criticisms of the remake of Black Christmas is that like they get into like the backstory of the killer, and they try and like change the plot in a way that is like a fresh take, or it's like trying to do something different, and it just gets out of control. So this is like a super fun self-contained story. And if any of that like interests you, like you should just stop listening and go watch it before we get into spoilers, because it has a very interesting twist in my mind.
Yes.
That is worth experiencing cold.
So maybe now just let's talk about the plot a little bit. What did you think of the big reveal at the end? Was that the type of ending that you were thinking about? Is that where you thought the movie was going to take you? Because now that we're kind of just talking into or venturing into spoiler territory, pardon me, in terms of the Jess relationship problem that we see, and for those listening who maybe haven't seen the movie yet, Jess has a long-term boyfriend, or it's assumed to be a long-term boyfriend, and Jess finds out that she's pregnant, and she wants to abort the baby, and her boyfriend is possessive, to say the least, emotionally manipulative, not a good person. But throughout the movie, it drops these hints, and it's not always an obvious hint. You feel like you're the detective watching the movie, and you're like, this is a little suspect. Is this guy the killer? And it gives you enough little tidbits along the way that you're like, close to the climax of the movie, you're like, okay, he's the killer. This, like, it's obvious, right? And it turns out he's not the killer.
Yeah, that was a really interesting twist. I would say up until the last like 5 minutes of the movie being over, I really did think, I think his name's Peter.
Yes.
Yeah. I really thought that he was the killer, because they do this interesting thing where in the final confrontation, they frame him similarly to the killer with the camera and like the shots and the music and sort of how Jess is reacting to him showing up. They really make it seem like he is the killer, and it's actually really tragic because now we're fully into spoilers. The final confrontation of the movie ends with Jess caving his skull in and killing him, and she survives.
Yes.
And Peter is throughout, and you put it very well that like it is you do feel like the detective witnessing this, because there are things about his character that seem kind of off and seem very similar to the character, or to the killer rather, that, you know, he could be a little emotionally unstable, he could be violent, he at one point destroys a piano very violently. Yes. And you see that he's like potentially capable of all this stuff, but it shows that he is 100% not the killer. And I think maybe that's what people didn't like about it when it first came out, that it had a very ambiguous ending. And I loved that. That was such a good twist. And they really make you feel like he is the killer up until the very end. So yeah, I loved it. I really liked that ending. What did you think? Did you like it?
Well, no, I loved it because so often now, movies are formulaic. They fall into tropes. It's rare that I can watch a horror movie and not at least kind of piece together who the killer is by the end. And the first time I watched this movie, knowing nothing about it, way at the start even, I was like, I pointed to my partner, I said, this guy is the killer. Because as
you had a feeling.
Well, I was 100% positive, because one of the things that the killer does throughout the movie is he makes these phone calls. They're very demented, they're perverted, they're meant to harass the recipient. He
plays like
unhinged.
multiple voices, like almost like he's reliving some sort of childhood trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
And supposedly he does a phone call after each victim, but these phone calls are being received by the sorority house, and they're getting harassed. And each time a phone call is being made, Peter's not there. Peter's never around. And then at one point, kind of, I'm going to say maybe around the 1/3 or mid-movie mark, a phone call is made. Jess is alone in the house. And here comes Peter walking down from upstairs. And it's like, oh, I was just taking a nap.
He says he's taking a nap.
Right after another person in the sorority house was murdered. And you're just like, no, I'm pretty sure you're the killer. And during the movie, you really don't get a clear visual of who the killer is. There's maybe 2 shots in the movie where you get an outline of him, and the clearest shot of the killer that you see, he kind of has the same haircut as Peter even. Everything that happens in the movie, it's like it's feeding you the breadcrumbs that just makes you think that Peter is the one doing it. And up to the end, you think he is the killer. He dies, and you realize, no, you actually got it wrong. Yeah. And here's this guy still hanging out in the attic.
They, like, as soon as everybody left the room, because, like, they leave Jess, she's, like, sedated. Everybody leaves, and the shot holds on her, and I was like, oh, God, no, he's still in the house. Like, that's all I could think. And it's such a masterful example of creating tension that, like, you like, my palms were getting sweaty by the end of it, because you just have this suspicion that they got it wrong, and they're so sure of themselves, and it plays out in this, like, a really poetic way that that the killer is still there. And it zooms out. The final shot is of, like, the first girl that gets suffocated and killed and is up in the attic. And it just, like, pans back, and it just kind of slowly zooms out, and then that's the end. You just see the outside of the house. It's a very, very powerful ending.
But that's not even the total end. So it zooms out, and it holds that shot for a long time, and the phone rings again. And the implication is each time the phone rings, he's killed somebody. So there's this implication that Jess was left alone in the house. Jess is now probably dead. And either way, it's this really uncomfortable silence where the credits are rolling over the house. And it's the same shot of the house as the opening shot. And here's, like, this old-timey phone ring just going over and over again for, like, a minute or 2 minutes. And you're just sitting there, you're like, holy crap, this is dark. This is nihilistic.
Yeah, it's a very dark ending. Like, way darker. I thought that this was going to maybe be, like, a good for her movie. Like, where Jess actually does get to, one, take revenge on Peter for all the shit that he does to her. But then also, save, like, get the killer at the same time. I really thought that then maybe that was where they were going, and I'm kind of glad that they didn't go with that. I think that would have made the impact of the movie just a little bit less. It would have been a little more predictable. Do you think that they could remake this? Like, if they did a shot for shot remake, do you think it would do well today? Do you think they could capture that same feeling, that same sort of tension that the original movie creates?
I don't know. It's hard to recreate a movie, even shot for shot. And one example that I can point to this is there's a movie by, I think his name is Michael Hanke, and it's an Austrian film. And what's it called? I'm gonna need to look this up. But basically, there's this Austrian film, and it's about this family that goes to a cabin, and then these 2 random boys come in, knock on the door, and now the rest of the movie is basically them terrorizing this couple. It's a very famous movie. Can't think of the name, and that's bothering me so much. But what the director did was he wanted to do a U.S. movie of the same thing, and he did literally a shot-for-shot remake with Tim Roth.
It was the same director?
Same director, and it was a shot-for-shot remake, and it didn't have the same punch. And that, to me, that's as close to a shot-for-shot, like, true recreation, because it's even the same director who did it.
That's huge, yeah.
But I think one of the appeals for this particular movie, at least, is I like the old-timey feel of it. I like that it feels retro.
It does feel very retro. I will say that, like, there are, so you combine, like, that film look that it has, that and the retro aesthetic of, like, the phones and the house itself. And I gotta say, it really feeds into some extremely iconic looking shots that, like, are iconic without having a character like Michael Myers or Ghostface in it. And
Yes.
I have to point to the shot where we see the killer's eye through like the crack in the door. Oh my God,
Perfect.
it was so good. Like that has stuck with me
Yes.
for the past like 48-ish hours since I've watched the movie. It's so good. I just like wonder if that would have been less impactful if there was like if let's say, and we find out that the killer's name is Billy.
Yes.
If Billy had been more iconic, like a Michael Myers or Ghostface, or I can't really think of any. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of other iconic
Yep.
killers out there. Do you think it would have had the same impact, or does it help that we don't really see him?
It absolutely helps. Like one of the best aspects of this movie is it doesn't explain who Billy is. There, you mentioned it previously. There's a little bit of alluding in terms of the characters he plays to himself during these phone conversations, that he had a sister and supposedly there was some incident involving his sister, and clearly it's caused some trauma.
Yeah.
But you don't know where he came from. You don't know anything about his backstory. You don't even know if he's escaped from prison, a psychiatric care facility. You
Is
know
he just a random
nothing
guy
about
that
him.
snapped? Like,
And you also
Yeah, we don't
don't know
know.
why. You don't know why he chose this house. Why this sorority house did he go into? And like online, some theories might be maybe that was his childhood home, and that's where he feels attached to. Maybe. We don't know. And Bob Clark, the director, has intentionally not explained anything. And I think with the remakes, and I've never seen the remakes, simply because I've seen the reviews and I'm like, do I really want to waste my time with that?
Yeah.
But the remakes, as you said, try to explain and give a little bit of substance to the backstory. And based on how those films were received, I don't know if that's a good idea. I think the charm of this movie is you don't know anything.
It's way more terrifying, just the idea of him being a mindless killer that we have no idea why, like with zero motivation seemingly. It almost makes him more like Michael Myers in the original. I haven't seen any of the newer Halloweens,
Yes.
but I do know that they kind of go into his backstory. At least, like I think the Rob Zombie one did.
Rob Zombie does a lot.
Yeah, and so like I think that like that is like so much more terrifying, and it almost seems more realistic that like there could be a killer out there that has like he's literally just killing to kill. That has a lot more staying power. So in your opinion, you would say that the way that he is portrayed in this movie like really elevates it.
I think it's one of the best aspects of the film. But for me, in addition to Billy's caricature, pronounce the word for me. It's not coming.
Character?
Caricature?
Characterization?
We're gonna go with that.
Okay.
There's a word and it's not forming off my tongue. But in addition to Billy's backstory, what I love most about this movie is actually the characters in it. I think each of them are developed they're one note largely, with the exception of Jess maybe, but they're interesting. They're full of personality. My two favorite characters by far. Number one is Mrs. Mack, the house mom.
Oh, she's hilarious.
She is the best character in the movie.
Yeah.
Nash, the dumb cop, also amazing in his own right.
I gotta say, he was hilarious. And that feeds into some of the moments in this movie like that are funny, are like laugh out loud funny, I gotta say. But anyways.
But Mrs. Mack, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, she's the sorority house mom. She's the one who checks in on everyone, makes sure they're okay. But she's also an extreme alcoholic, and her character personality is really raiding the house for her various stores of whatever she's drinking. So she has hollowed out books with a bottle of alcohol. She is tied a chain to a bottle of alcohol and put it in the tank of a toilet, and that's what she uses as mouthwash. Yeah. Like she's such a good character, and to use an informal term, she's such a bro to the sorority sisters. Like
she knows what's going on.
Well, no, and she has their back. So, like, when we talked about at the start where the movie really begins with one of their friends being missing, that friend was supposed to meet her dad, and when her dad didn't see his daughter, he went to the sorority house, and that kind of kicked off the police investigation portion. It's his father looking for his daughter. But he goes up to her room at the sorority house to see, I don't know, maybe there's any indication of where she's at. And her room is filled with semi-lewd posters. Like there's one with an elderly person flipping the bird. There's another one with a tasteful butt on it. And Mrs. Mack, she puts her hand over the butt posters.
It up.
Yeah, because like at one point the dad says, he's like, I didn't send my daughter here to be drinking and hooking up with boys. And Mrs. Mack's like, well, he's not going to want to see this poster.
She's a very good character. Definitely did not expect such strong characterizations from this movie. And I gotta touch on Barb. She is so funny. I think her name is Barb. Yeah. And she just has these really great, like, almost, like, I don't know. She has like these funny interactions with people that really like humanize like everybody else around her. Like she has this funny interaction with Nash, who is this like really dumb beat cop that takes their story, and she's just like messing with them. And I think that really like adds to the kill where she dies. Like when she dies, like I felt really bad. I really felt this like connection to her and pretty much all the characters in some way, even though some of them didn't have a lot of screen time. It was a very very good portrayal of all of the characters. Mrs. Mack is definitely the funniest, though, I gotta say.
She's the standout. But I don't know if you noticed this while you were watching. Often when you're watching a horror movie, especially, just due to the nature of how they're structured, there's a lot of moments where you're basically yelling at the screen saying, why didn't you do something? Like, why didn't you run away? Why'd you go to the basement? Why didn't you phone this person? I don't know. You could think of a million different things, and I'm sure you have those experiences. In this movie, there is an explanation for almost everything. So, for instance, when our favorite character, Mrs. Mack, dies, no one looks for her because it's Christmas holiday, and when someone was leaving the house, she said, oh yeah, I might not be here because I think I'm going to my brother's house or something.
Yeah,
she was going to a family's house. Or towards the end of the movie, when Jess tries to run away from Billy, she tries to go through the front door, and it doesn't open. And that's explained earlier in the film as well, because there's a line where Mrs. Mack can't open it. She's been like, I've been on the handyman for weeks. This is pissing me off. But there's these tiny little explanations for everything that happens. For most things, there's a couple of things like, how don't the sorority sisters hear Billy when he's making those calls? Because he's literally screaming in the phone. Like that's not answered. But a lot of the smaller things, like why did no one look for Barb after she was killed? Well, holy crap, did she have a rough night drinking before? She's sleeping in her room. No one wants to disturb her. There's all these tiny little explanations that makes you understand why the movie or why the characters in the film do what they do.
The internal logic of the movie actually all holds up. Like the fact that when Billy is calling and the police have set up a wiretap on the phone, like the reason why they have to, because they tell Jess, you have to keep the guy on the phone. And that's because, and I didn't know that this is how it worked. But like physically a guy had to walk through the telephone like switching station to like find the location. And I have to say too, I was like really happy with like when he discovers that the call is like coming from inside the house and everybody's very confused. I just thought that was such a good release of tension, because you kind of have the suspicion that potentially, like, where would he be calling from? It wouldn't, like, you're kind of trying to like rationalize like where he would be calling from if he's calling after making these kills. And yeah, when he realizes that the call is coming from inside the house, that was just such a good moment that it just like ramps up the tension. It releases the tension, but then you realize, oh my god, Jess is like right in his trap essentially. So it's good. And the whole movie just like really makes sense in that way that like sometimes horror movies don't, like you said.
And the other great thing, in addition to the internal logic of the movie holding up, I also appreciated that spatially, it made sense. Like, especially after the first kill, I think her name is Claire. That's the first sorority sister who goes missing. Yeah. You see him exit the room. He's carrying the body. He goes up in the attic. And there's like moments where you see him move during the house or other characters move during the house, and you understand where everyone is placed within the scene. You have a strong sense of spatial awareness throughout the film, and I like that as well, because it like, this is an hour and a half movie. It's very tight. Everything just logically works.
Yeah, it does. And I will say that, like, knowing the layout of the house and like how and knowing how Billy is moving about the house, that moment when Jen kicks the door and it like kind of knocks him over, and then she runs away, and you get like this one, like, it's gotta be like less than a second, maybe 2 second shot of like someone running past the banisters to like chase after her. Like, that whole like maybe 10-15 second scene of her running down to the basement is so good, because Billy is almost portrayed as like, it's almost supernatural, like how fast he runs. Like, you get the sense that he is moving very fast, and you know exactly how far away he is from Jess. And to me, that was just like, it was so terrifying in the best way.
Well, and it also heightens the suspense of it, because like, this movie isn't scary by most modern standards. It is definitely more on the thriller rather than
more of
horror,
a thriller.
But it escalates the tension of the film, because the whole time, if they're on the second floor in a bedroom, you know he's right above, just like waiting around in the attic.
Yeah.
The tightness of the space and how close all the characters are together, knowing that Billy is right there the whole time and he can hear everything you're doing. He can wander down from his little attic space whenever he wants. It escalates the tension. At least it did for me.
Yeah. And I think that it was a smart idea to have the first kill happen so early on in the movie. And then you witness it happen. And then you also know that she is just up in the attic. I think that's just such a good decision, because the whole time they're talking to the police and they're trying to figure things out, and you're like, she's in the attic. Like, you just look up in the attic, and you have like these really great moments where like he is so close, like you said, like he is hearing everything you say. He like has full reign of the house. Yeah, I just think it goes back to what I said earlier. It is like a masterclass of tension for being like so short and being just so understated. It just all works so well.
Well, and compared to more contemporary slasher films, the typical slasher pace is you generally have about 30 minutes of exposition or like introductory character. You have 30 minutes of character introductions and plot setup, more or less. And then, you kind of start getting a few kills. People are wondering who did it. Then you get the climax. This film, as you mentioned near the start, it starts with Billy's perspective. He's wandering around. He's looking in the windows. He sees the lattice going up to the attic. And then I made a note of this, and this is probably the first note I made when I rewatched the film for this. At the 12-minute mark is the first kill. It wastes no time at all. And I think it's unique because the killer's there from the start. There's not a lot of lead up to introducing the killer. He's literally your perspective from the opening.
Yeah.
And after that, it's just working on those threads and how they weave together, both the Jess relationship side of the story and the police side of the story and the investigatory side of things.
Yeah, and it I think does a good job of showing and not telling, which I think a lot of modern movies and potentially modern horror movies fall into that trap of. Like I gotta point out the scene where Barb is killed. I watched it and then I went back and I was just kind of refreshing my memory of some of the scenes today. And I went back and watched her kill, and it's almost like the shower scene in Psycho. It's not very gory. I mean, like, not in like a gratuitous way. There's blood, but like you get some shots of the killer, you get some shots of the knife, you get some shots of Barb, but it's like it's combined in this really like artful way that it implies that he's killing her very viciously, but you don't actually see like guts coming out or like the stab wounds. And I just think that is like with the bread and butter of really good thriller movies, is like being able to show and imply stuff without having like, I think the goriest part is the scene where the cop's like throat is slit in like the car, and you don't even see that happen. It just cuts to him, and you see it, but it's not gratuitous. I think that's a huge thing that just like really hammers home how well crafted this movie is. It doesn't need to explain a lot, and it doesn't need to show a lot, or it doesn't need to beat things to death like the gore or violence. It's really great.
In terms of violence, it's basically all implied violence. I recall seeing something where that was a conversation Bob Clark had with another person of whether they should go a little bit more into the gory side of things or whether keep it off screen and implied a little bit more. And obviously the decision was to keep it implied, and they thought that was more effective. And I like it. Like, I don't mind gore at all. Like, I think there's a time and place for it. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of some of the more extreme gore movies too. But what I like is this makes it a little bit more accessible for people who
it is
aren't
much
a fan
more
of that.
accessible.
It's nice.
I think that it really does open this up to regular viewers, though, because it has, like you said, not a lot of violence, which is a turnoff for some people. And it also is just more of a thriller, more of a true crime procedural, which with just really good characters. So, I mean, it's kind of like wraps up the entire conversation. Like, I would recommend this to anybody who loves just thrillers in general. What about you?
Anyone who likes thrillers, anyone who likes horror movies, anyone who likes even a little bit of more dark humor, because this movie definitely has moments of levity. There's moments that I genuinely chuckled at. And you know what? If you like Christmas movies too, this is a Christmas movie like through and through as well. There's Christmas carols. There's your classic Christmas songs. It's during Christmas break. It's fun, and there's a good juxtaposition to the whole thing, because I think when we're talking about the violent Barb kill, Barb was being killed while Jess was opening the door, listening to these cute little Christmas carolers. It's very self-aware, and it's fun. It's also terrifying. It's suspenseful. It's accessible. It's a short movie. I can't say enough good things about it. There's very few flaws in it, as we talked about before. The internal logic of the whole movie works very well. It's not a movie that you're going to get frustrated with afterwards, thinking, why didn't the characters do this?
Yeah.
Like, you can be frustrated at Nash for failing at his job, but
yeah,
that was the point of his character.
Yeah, it was. Oh my God. When the detective is like, okay, Nash, I need you to call Jess. Do not say that the killer is in the house. Just tell her to leave. And then he literally tries like once to convince her to leave, and then is like, okay, the killer's actually in the house. You have to get out of there. And that is the perfect example of like some of the levity in this movie, that like it is not levity to try and like make it more accessible, because I find that sometimes in horror movies, like there are like tropey characters that are like funny, but they're there to like call attention to themselves, whereas like this, like Nash is just like a bad police officer, and it's horrible. Funny in like the best. It's funny in the best way. It has all good elements of a Christmas movie, of a horror movie, and it's way funnier than it needs to be, and I love that.
So what's your overall rating for the film? Where would you place it?
So like if I'm rating it on Letterboxd, which is out of 5, I would rate this a 4.5. This is a solid movie. I'm excited to go watch it again. This will probably be on my staple Christmas movie watch list. And I gotta say, it's a real testament to like how accessible this movie is. I was watching it, and my partner Morag came downstairs, sat down, and then watched the entire movie with me, and she
Oh my
was
God.
loving it. She loved it so much. So I mean, yeah, I think it like is resting at a solid 4.5 for me.
Same thing, 4.5. There are very few flaws in the film. I'm actually going to be importing a 4K collector's edition of this movie because I recently found out that the States released a collector's edition on December 6th. So that's going to be another Christmas
month.
Yeah, because I've been looking for a 4K copy of this, and I've never seen one. And turns out the U.S. is now taking the charge. They're doing a solid for me. That's going to be my Christmas present to myself.
Oh, that's so great. I do feel like this film needs to be preserved in like a high quality format because I will say, like, I watched it on through Google Play or whatever what you have it on YouTube, I guess. And there were some quality issues, but very, very minimal. I think because like it's such an old movie, there like a lot of problems can happen in the digital transfer. So I'm glad you're getting the 4K copy because I feel like it'll be a treat to watch and see.
No, I totally agree. I'm very excited for it. And for anyone who's looking to watch a great Christmas horror film, and for anyone who has a low tolerance but yet wants to explore the genre, go pick this up, rent it, watch it. And in terms of the next podcast, what are we watching, Eric?
We are going to watch the supposed cinematic experience of our generation. We're going to watch Avatar 2. The Way of Water? Is that The Way of Water?
Okay, how is this supposed to make $2 billion if you don't even know the name? It is The Way of Water, by the way.
It is? Okay, because I was going to say it reminds me of like it could almost be like an old kung fu movie title.
Yes.
And that's how I remember it. But yeah, we're going to be watching the next Avatar, and I think we're both going into it with similar expectations. That it's just like for me, I think it's going to be interesting to see the visual effects. I do think it will be kind of cool to see how they are adapting this like pretty basic sci-fi world to be something a little bit bigger. So I don't know. We'll see. What about you? What do you think? What are you expecting out of this?
I think it's going to be a technical marvel. I have no doubt about that. I think it's otherwise going to be the same as Avatar. Avatar was a perfectly fine movie. Did its story blow me away? No. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Did I watch it probably 6 or 7 times within the period that the first couple of years it was out? Yeah, I did. I don't think it's going to be a bad movie. I just don't think it's going to be the gold standard of cinema that James Cameron is pumping it up to be.
Yeah, he is like definitely he is the movie, like in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like it's the fact that it is so much like his I guess it literally all rides on him, you know, brand recognition. Because like I think Disney owns the property, but like it's not the same thing as like a Marvel movie. Like you're going to see James Cameron's vision. And so in that case, it is kind of cool that there are still filmmakers out there that are very much like the project. What's your prediction? Like if you had to say, like, what do you think you're going to end up like rating it based on your experience with Avatar 1? Do you think this is going to rank pretty high for you?
It'll probably get a 3.5 or a 4. Like I expect I'm going to enjoy it. I don't have any doubts about that. I just don't think it's going to be a 9 out of 10 kind of film. I think, as we said, it's going to be a technical marvel. It's going to same way as Avatar 1. I think it's gonna push the boundaries of what our technology is capable of right now, and I think that's fascinating. The first Avatar changed the landscape for 3D movies. This, I think, is going to change the landscape for mocap and how that kind of work is done. I just don't think the plot is going to be a 9 out of 10 plot, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, no. Top Gun 2, my favorite movie probably of this last year. I think I gave it a perfect score, if not a 4.5. Like
Yeah.
a movie doesn't need to be award-winning. It doesn't have to have an award-winning script or screenplay. It can be perfectly entertaining in its own right and be a great movie. So we're gonna see. I'm going into it with open mind. I'm not going in expecting to dislike it. Quite the opposite.
And I think that it really does show that these bigger movies, like, there is something to them beyond just having like a good plot, like or like a groundbreaking plot, let's say.
Yes.
Like I do think, and like one of my most favorite movies from the past couple of years is Dune. And it is kind of in a similar position. Like, the story is really, really good, but it also like had like some very technically good shots and special effects and cinematography and music. And I think it all coalesces to be a very, very good movie, but it is still a pretty standard sci-fi plot. Like, a lot of things, it literally takes place on a desert planet. You know, like there's nothing more sci-fi than that, and it still manages to elevate beyond just being that kind of a tropey sci-fi plot. So yeah, I definitely am going into it not expecting to hate it and not having the highest expectations, but I think it will be fun, and I think it'll be fun to talk about at the very least.
I agree. So people are gonna have to stay tuned, see if our predictions live up to what we actually see.
Yeah, so definitely stick around for that. That episode is going to come out in the first couple of weeks of January. And yeah, you can check us out on Patreon. We are BTF Pod. You can just search that up. You can subscribe, and there you're going to basically, with that, get access to this video podcast a little bit early. And for everybody else, it'll be available on all platforms in audio form and video form just a little bit later, but patrons get it early. That's the main kind of thing that you'll get from it. And we're toying around with some other ideas for the Patreon, potentially a live stream once a month, potentially a watch along, a commentary, if you will, of a specific movie. I know I haven't cleared any of this with Riley. He's nodding his head. I really appreciate that. But
when you say watch along,
we have some things in the works that will be available to patrons and not to anybody else. So if you want to see like everything that we are doing, go to our Patreon, so consider subscribing. But if not, you can find us on all platforms. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, and this video is going to be on YouTube, and it will also be probably in just audio form on YouTube. And that's kind of it. Riley, you can have the final word before we wrap this all up.
We're approaching the Christmas season. If you want to give your loved one the gift that keeps on giving, I recommend maybe a bit of a Patreon subscription to Beyond the Frame.
Yeah, we haven't uploaded anything in months, but we promise it'll be worth it.
But other than that, thanks for listening. Very excited to keep talking about this. I'm loving the new video format. I think that's going to be excellent, and we look forward to having your participation and your listening for the next episode.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.